Alright, I was asked to do this one, so I carved a little bit of space in my schedule to try and explain what on earth happened to the CCC event. It's technically an Epic of Remnant chapter, as people were so kind to point out, so I figured I'd finish this up before we got to the Lost Belt, so let's get started. Where to begin? Alright, so basically, we wake up and Mash is there, and I think she tells us good morning. Go to the command room where Da Vinci is, and she's like, hey, we're going to be doing our yearly call out to this top secret oil rig magic base thing that you've never heard of. Want to talk to anyone? And we're like, sure. So we pick up the phone and the music changes to this sick beat. And for some reason, it's like 2 decibels louder than what is comfortable. After we turn the volume down, a purple-haired girl with some absolutely huge assets shows up on the monitor. She tells us that her name is BB, spelled B-E-E.B. and that she is taking control of the oil rig and intends to throw it into the Mariana Trench. And we're like, oh no. So we summon 3 of our top-tier waifus to go and beat up this mysterious girl with a BDSM fetish. We hit the transporter and she's just like, nope, and yoinks our waifus away. We see a cutscene of us transporting and land on the lady from Nightingale's Noble Phantasm. We pick ourselves up, dust off, and gauge the situation. From what we can see, we are mostly alone when then some rogue servants come for us. They're intercepted by a girl with scissors for legs and who repels them temporarily. She tells us that she's the mince eviscerate lacerate tool known as Melt. She goes to give us a handshake, but alas, she has no hands. She points at us with her massive knee spike and declares that we are not worth saving, and that we will digitize into Captain Crunch if we don't get somewhere safe. She then proceeds to save us from a sad heart player who keeps telling us that his album isn't selling well enough. Unfortunately, he wants us to pay for the copy that he handed us, so he pursues. We run into a sunbathing gorilla who defeats the heart player. He claims to be a servant from Chaldea, but is in fact a different hot blonde. He seems pretty adamant about it, so we're like, alright, this is what causes Melt to become a tsundere. Then we give the heart player 10 QP for the album and he becomes loyal to us. Melt begins feeling like she's losing us to 2 very hot men, so she decides to tie the knot and asks us to go to church. We agree on the condition that our 2 new boyfriends can come along. She begrudgingly agrees. The camera pans away and we see a dude with 2 guns glaring at us. We reach the church and find an old evangelical who is taken to crucifying. However, his carpentry skills were lacking, so he went for the old meat tree method. He sounds something like this for the entire fight. He has the almighty protection from God, but unfortunately the corruption of the internet manages to defeat him. As he lays dying, he tells us that the church will protect us from harm. Melt lets us know that this means that the church has a VPN, so we won't be turned into Captain Crunch. At the church, we see a small doll that Melt eats for some reason. We all hang out until the scary dude from before appears and tries to shoot us. He then laughs and puts the gun away, saying he's a bounty hunter or some shit. He assures us that since we are not his targets, we won't be killed. Maybe. He joins our ranks as well. We all sit down to a nice cup of cocoa around a bonfire and discuss what to do. Naturally, we ask Melt because she looks like BB and claims to have once worked for her. She tells us that the oil rig is slowly falling down a big hole and that time in here moves quicker than the outside world or slower, I don't really recall. Then, BB interrupts to talk to us about cryptocurrency. She tells us that we need to mine BB bucks off of enemies that are running around and that we can purchase extra copies of her in the shop. We grind for the event CE instead, which has the worst FSN girl on it. Yes, I'm saying that for the exact reason you're thinking. While we're out crypto mining, we are attacked by a cosplayer who is trying too hard. She throws 1,000 swords at us and we run away. BB sends a green man to tell us that she has guards around certain areas and that she gave them a stupid broken ability to make them more challenging to fight. The green man really doesn't want to work for BB, but she wants to turn him into a pig. The connection here? Couldn't tell ya. Anyway, we pay BB and she opens up a few tunnels for us. While we and Melt are walking around, we learn a bit about what we're walking on. Turns out it's not Nightingale's Noble Phantasm, it's BB's spiritual body or some shit. It is a submarine-exclusive retired ancient person's home, or Seraph. It houses all of the souls of the heroic spirits who have died, where they can come and relax, similar to Valhalla with the exception of it also being a secret mage oil rig. The mages here seem to have made contact with BB or something else and were sent into cyberspace or something, where the Lord of the Flies program was running. Along the way, we see a holy grail and go to touch it. If Dark Souls has taught us anything, it's that you don't touch random-ass cups. The cup shows us a vision of a man being beaten to death with a shovel. When we come to, Melt says that we need to travel to the land of Milk and Booba, and we pick up the sad boy and the gorilla along the way. We encounter a screaming BDSM monster who's chasing a girl that is totally not Juniko. We throw a rare prism at the monster and leave with the girl. She gets the hots for the gorilla because the gorilla is hot. We take her back to the church and she tells us that she is a computer nerd and that there are only 3 survivors. That night we open a box behind the chapel of the church after buying a key from BB. Inside is a cup, and we touch it. It's actually a porno. The tags are Mindbreak, Demon, and Tentacles. Mel tells us there is a planetarium or something in the center of the map that we should go see, to see if there are any secret records or not. My hunch is that she just wants to go and see the stars. We leave Not Juniko and Sad Boy at the church and we head to the planetarium. The Sad Boy doesn't like traveling with us because we only gave him 10 QP and he still needs more money for the albums. I think we get lost and end up somewhere else, but wherever we are, we find the better Tamamo there. She tells us that BB gave her a salmon, so now she works for her even though she knows BB is evil. We give her a mackerel, and before she can flip, BB drops her down a big hole. As we're heading back to where we need to be, we find a cup and get a vision of a hitman and a crazy dude. We learn not to trust the crazy dude. Edgemia joins us and we run into the cat again. Edgemia shoots her in the head, killing her instantly. She revives and is now on her side, much to the confusion of the edgy lad. We learn that there is a flip side to the map and we need to use the Boingo glove to tickle the map to get it to flip over. You're probably thinking I'm taking creative liberty on my part here, but no, I'm not. We buy it with our crypto and are flipped over into a hellish carnival where Liz is singing. Cat stabs her in the jugular. As we're about to leave, the BDSM monster comes after us and the gorilla stops her to suplex her. I think the tryhard cosplayer was there and trying to fight us, but I don't know. We head for the head because that's the most sensible place for the control room to be. We meet a green man there and he says that BB is now selling new wares if we have the coin and flips us over to the other side again. Edgemia gets left behind and BB bribes him with NFTs to kill everyone. Back to the main group, we're told by BB that if we want to beat the BDSM monster, we have to touch her booba. We volunteer as tribute. The gorilla reappears and holds her down while we slap her tits. She comes back to her senses and is now an innocent monster. She joins our party and agrees to help us. We get into the control room and find a tentacle monster there and kill it. We then find the crazy guy from the cup vision we saw and know that we shouldn't trust him. He tells us that he's now in charge of us and that we can't do anything without his say-so. We ignore him and go about looking for files. Turns out they were already deleted. We begrudgingly bring him back with us to the church. At the church, we find a mystery code that tells us that the person in the porno cup was actually a therapist that got possessed by a demon god that fled to the Temple of Time, and that was how BB was brought here. The demon god sent the oil rig into the future so that we wouldn't notice it. Unfortunately, we did. Mel then tells us that she knew, but she wasn't allowed to tell us or something. She then tells us that the reason why there's so many insane servants running around is not just because this is a nursing home for the ancient servants, but also because they're being made into Soylent Green to power the Seraph. We make the decision that this is elder abuse and make moves to stop BB and the hentai monsters, but we also decide to turn in for the night. As there are now two people who are racist against Sakura faces, Melt and Lip stay outside to guard while we sleep. That night, the gorilla dies. When everyone wakes up, they accuse the Sakuras of killing the gorilla, but due to the lack of evidence, we dismiss them. We then go out with Edgemia and the Sakuras to go crypto mining. We go back to the backside to fight Suzuka again. We get a phone call from the guy that we shouldn't trust, and he tells us that we need to flip the world right where Suzuka is standing, so we do. We knock her out and jump into her brain because of magical cat powers or some shit. Then, with even more magical cat powers, we convince her to join us. A hentai monster bitch slaps Melt into a hole and we follow her. It's covered in garbage and Melt breaks her legs. We try and fix her, but it takes the sad man coming down to help us to really fix her. We then find out that Edgemia has cut the rope to get us back up, and BB shows up for some reason and says that we need to keep going this way. We listen to her even though she's our enemy. Back at the church, Edgemia kills the guy that we shouldn't trust and the Not Jinako girl. The Not Jinako girl then transforms into a hot nun and kills Edgemia. We learn that to save Melt, we have to touch her boobs as well, so we do. And in return, we get sucked into her brain where we fight her. The fight somehow cures her, so we go back to church to actually marry her. We find that it's empty, so no one can officiate the wedding, and BB tells us that the time for judgment hath come, so we go to her set and fist fight her. We win, then the hot nun appears and smugly becomes a god. We learn that the demon that was inside of her is now under her control, adding domination loss to the hentai tags. She then challenges us to a fight, and we can't beat her because she has a bunch of bullshit buffs. Melt has a PTSD flashback where we fucking die. Alright, so, this Melt is actually an alternate timeline Melt from a time where we died and the hot nun smashes her hands. She is somehow able to get into this timeline and meets up with her other self and explains the situation. Her self from this timeline agrees and turns into a doll and hides in the church. This was the doll that Melt ate for some reason. I don't know if it was to hide evidence or what the hell that was all about, but yeah. Now, she is convinced never to let that happen again, and thus uses all of our crypto to buy Saint's Quartz and summon Bazit. Bazit then kills the nun in 2 hits. Then Melt tells Lip to toss her, and they do a joint NP that we don't actually have in-game, but we should have in-game. I'm not mad about it, and makes Melt into a massive spear that penetrates the nun. The nun then dies and sinks to the bottom of the ocean until Summer 5. Like always, the day is saved, and this time no survivors to worry about. Melt tells us how much she loves us because we accepted her for who she was and that she wants to come with us to Chaldea. Unfortunately, instead we get an NP2 Passion Lip and Melt won't even show up with her penguin form, as is life. Anyway, next up is Russia, big ass trees and elephants.